You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, Flammies, to the Storm Tracker podcast, tracking the storm that is the Miami Hurricanes. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms and also this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Joining me today, I have John Garcia Jr., Rivals.com national recruiting analyst, ready to talk a little Miami Hurricanes recruiting. And I don't know about you, John, but my head is spinning from everything that's been going on this week with the Hurricanes. I mean, it's been a wave of commitments, but I'm hearing there's possibly more on the table for the Hurricanes in recruiting. Last weekend coming up here, so we'll see what else this staff has in store. But let's talk about the commitments that happened this week. You got Jaden Wilkerson, you got Demetrius Campbell, and of course, Omari Wallace. John, when you heard the three names kind of pop this week, which name gets you the most excited?
It's got to be Omari Wallace. I mean, this is a guy who, down here, we've been talking about for years, literally years. We wrote about this last night. When you win a battle like that, I think perceptionally there's like a boost. There's a general boost. Like, man, this was a long recruitment, ups and downs, different teams challenging at different times. So for Miami to win this recruitment right after his first official visit, which was supposed to be the first of many, I think says a lot about what has long been built down here. And certainly, what it says a lot about Omari. This is a kid who wanted to kind of be done with the process. You could tell talking to him the last few times. I know you talked to him recently, so have I. He was getting to that point. And I think this is a great get, not only because he's a Miami Central guy and that pipeline keeps going. I mean, that stuff is obvious. But I think when you talk about his game, he just kind of does everything. There's not one point you focus on with Omari's game. It's like he's a B plus like across the board, which is great in the secondary because it means two things. One, he's coachable. You could probably move him around somewhere and he'll probably be okay, whether it's deep safety, nickel, slot corner. Maybe he could work the boundary a little bit. And secondly, he's going to be ready to go pretty early in his college career because he's so experienced. He's been really the table setter for that Miami Central defense for several years. We saw him at the spring game, really as the captain, getting guys lined up. So I think if you look at him physically, you like him. But if you look at the in-between, you start to love him. And you think this is a legitimate blue-chip player. Undersized, yes, but we've seen Miami specifically really roll well with those type of players in the secondary. And I mentioned it again on social media, Cam Kinchins, Jaquan Johnson, these type of hybrid impact safeties that are just so savvy, so instinctive that they make plays regardless of their size. I think Omari fits that mold to a T. And again, he's got another year of high school ball ahead of him before making that jump to the ACC. So really like this get, long-standing win, and a guy who I think as an underclassman in college makes an impact and cracks that too deep for the U.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the get by Miami. I love the comparisons to Cam Kinchins as well. If you look at Cam Kinchins' high school tape, it's very similar to the tape that we're watching now. He can just identify the football in the air, and he's not afraid to get physical as well. So he's a versatile player that can, play that nickel position if needed, or depending on how he kind of fills out his body, could play safety, either safety role, whether it be a free safety or strong safety. So I think it's also important that you continue that pipeline to Miami Central as well, because we all know that it's a pipeline. It's a major pipeline. Cristobal made it a priority, of course, as soon as he was hired, going down to 95th Street. So to continue that tradition is big too. Still gotta Another guy from Central that visited recently officially Ezekiel Marshland, so they could have another Central Rocket. But to go with the ones that are on the team, as far as with Wesley Basaint and Ruben Bain, you have a solid pipeline going there from Miami Central to the U. But now, we're on to kind of the next weekend here, where you got 10 official visitors here visiting Coral Gables. A lot of great players. You got Drake Stubbs, who's an outstanding talent. You got Ben Hanks, long corner, expected to be there as well. SJ from out west, a monster of an offensive lineman. Uh, a Mario Cristobal Mirabal type of guy. Just a ton of guys. You saw the list, John. Which prospect is the most important that Miami needs to make progress with this weekend?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from that perspective, like where is there ground to be made? I think you got to go to one of the elite DBs. So we just talked about Amari Wallace, but I think you got a couple of big-time safeties that are out there. Bryce Fitzgerald out of Miami Columbus has been trending to Florida. Florida State now feels pretty good in this race. So I think Miami has ground to make up there. And Hylton Stubbs, we just mentioned. I mean, this kid, he could end up as the number one safety when all is said and done. He is that dynamic coming out of Jacksonville, committed to USC right now, was a heavy Florida Gator lean before that, and that's where he was last weekend. So Miami probably running third at best for Stubbs. So clearly ground to make up with those two safeties. But I'm going to go to a commitment. I think it's Elijah Melendez. I think this kid has been as well-traveled as any recruit in the country out of Kissimmee Osceola. He's been getting a lot of SEC love. He went to Auburn for an official. He went to Ole Miss for an official, and he's fresh off of an official visit to the Oklahoma Sooners. Each of them really blew him away to the point where he is going into this visit publicly saying, even though he's a Miami commitment, these four schools are sort of even. And that's not what you want to hear if you're the committed program in the race. Now, luckily for Miami, this is his last official visit on the schedule. There is nothing planned for the fall. This is it. So I do think the ball is in Miami's court. But if you talk about making up ground, you could argue that Elijah Melendez is a kid that Miami needs to make up some ground for. And I think coming off of those SEC trips, Miami will be well positioned to contend for him. They've been able to show him every element of the program, the glitz and the glam side, but on the officials, you get a lot of intimate time. He'll be able to really sit down with Derek Nicholson, dig into X's and O's, dig into the expectations early in Melendez's college career. And that's what these other SEC programs have been able to do and have been able to sell at a higher level with that SEC tag, obviously being a big boost compared to Miami. So I think the counter for Miami is, hey, they already joke around with the Ray Lewis name, with Elijah, reemphasizing that and really getting into the football plan for him because he's experienced just about everything else that there is to experience at Miami. So huge weekend for the Canes in general, but as we keep talking about these guys, it looks like the defensive side of the ball is where there is ground to be made up for a lot of guys in the next few days.
Yeah, definitely. With all of these official visitors coming up this weekend, they're all on the defensive side of the ball. And the most interesting position to me, John, is defensive tackle, because that's not necessarily a position that they've addressed yet. You got a couple that can play the position that will be visiting. I heard talks of Darian Norris, who visited in June, that he may kick inside for if he eventually chooses the Hurricanes. But as far as like D tackles that play the position in high school, you got a couple of guys that I think that are important to possibly lock down as well. And, you want to go back to that Miami Central pipeline. You got Randy Adirika that is visiting this weekend. It's an interesting recruitment, that's been going on with him. I think Miami strong out of the gate for Adirika. Jason Taylor loved him, saw him at a practice, and then things kind of tapered off for like a while, and then it seemed like Penn State was kind of jumped into the forefront here, and now he's officially visiting on the last weekend. What are your thoughts on that recruitment and his chances of maybe staying home like Amari Wallace did?
Yeah, he's been fascinating, and I think he's a great example of the longevity of the process is not always a good thing for a recruit, right? Being so well known as a sophomore, as a junior, kind of opens the door to almost get over scouted because it creates more questions than answers sometimes. And it's the same thing that's happened with his ranking, right? He was a top 100 guy. Then we saw him and his body, he looks like he could probably be an interior guy for good, but how much can he add to the frame? So we had some question marks about it on our end as well. Still in the Rivals 250, still a blue chip recruit, legitimate 6'4" plus, great length. But we could see him adding a ton of weight to his frame. So I think that creates a bit of a skewed evaluation, right? Maybe at the front end, Jason Taylor and company, and we thought, hey, this could be a big physical exterior pass rusher, which is something that you don't see every day. Most teams don't carry a lot of those guys. But as time has gone on, you say, well, he's probably going to be an interior guy. Well, that could completely shake up, his spot on any school's recruiting board. So I do feel like Miami's come back around here. Taylor was at Miami Central spring game. I was there as well. Adirika had a really nice day. That extension he provides really allows him to move offensive linemen and dictate the pace. So if you combine that with the idea of getting bigger and stronger, I think it could only enhance some of the strengths that Adirika brings to the table. So you could sort of build the argument as to why he needs to be prioritized by many programs, especially the one closest to home. So Penn State definitely did a good job getting him up on campus. I think Louisville's involved too, but I think the ball has always been in Miami's court for this one. If the Hurricanes push, I see Adirika and Coral Gables for good. If it's still somewhat in question, I could see Penn State, coming down and getting another Floridian, which we talk about every cycle, to go up there and try to make an impact. So that will be a fascinating evaluation and recruitment altogether, but it looks like it could be coming to an end here in the next few weeks, which, again, timing-wise, good for Miami if they want to push for the blue chipper.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely would be a nice get for Miami if they're able to keep Adirika home. There's another player, defensive tackle wise, you touch on for a little bit is Jarquez Carter. This kid, you and I, we saw him at the Rivals camp, and kid dominated one of the best players out there. What do you think Miami needs to do, as far as his recruiting process? I think Miami's always kind of been up there for him, and now he gets to visit Coral Gables for his last official visit, at least in June. So Miami's chances there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this one has always felt like a classic Big Three battle. He's a Newberry kid, so he's close to Gainesville. The Gators have been in the mix really from the jump. He's gone up to Tallahassee, and now Miami gets their shot. I think he's got a lot of Miami qualities, kind of the opposite of Adirika, really, right? Adirika, long, lean. How much does he gain weight? How does that change things? Carter's the opposite, 6'2", completely, physically ready right now, 285, ready to go. And that's why he's sort of on a hot streak with his stock, right? Because he is compact and built, ready to go right now. So he's been able to dominate a lot of events in that process. So I think he's a guy that his offer list went national. and he flirted with, USC and some of these other schools, Ohio State. But for me, it was always going to be one of the big three in the state of Florida. So this is where another one where I think Miami's got a legitimate chance to close the gap. We think Florida might be the team to beat today, but we all know the Gators have a lot of question marks going into the 2024 season. So even if Carter comes off the board for the Gators in the near future, it could be a situation where Miami stays in the game. So this official visit will be important regardless of what Carter elects to do in the near future because, one, he's a big-time player, and two, he's got some schools in the mix that have a lot going on. So I think Miami's going to absolutely try to hang around as long as it possibly could here. But you try to make up ground in the short term if you can. He's one who is well-traveled. He's been everywhere. He's been to all his top schools more than once. So maybe you try to show him something different during the official visit. And I think Miami's, well aware of that if we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be interesting to hear kind of what Carter thinks about the Hurricanes after this weekend is all said and done. I think Miami has a great opportunity to really make up some ground in his recruitment. We'll see how that shakes out. But let's talk quarterbacks, man. Surprisingly, Florida's got a lot of them in these,
hey now,
especially in the 2026 class. And Miami still doesn't have a quarterback in that particular class. They were targeting a few of them who have come off the board, all from Florida. Coincidentally, Brady Hart commits to Michigan, Noah Grubbs to Notre Dame, and then missing one here from 2026 that committed recently. But
Will Griffin to Florida, yep.
Will Griffin to Florida was the other one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you've got a couple of still out there. Miami's still looking at a couple out there. But there's been some kind of, buzz around, the school about a couple of quarterbacks. Where do you think Miami kind of sits in this situation for the 2026 signal calling?
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys you mentioned were pretty high on the board for Shannon Dawson and company. So naturally, when those dominoes start falling nationally, and a lot of schools are going through this, not just Miami, you got to pivot pretty quickly. And I think the timing has been good for Miami. One, because like you said, this 26 quarterback class in the state of Florida is as good as it gets anywhere. I mean, it could stack up to Texas and California, which we'll say that about every position as Floridians, but not quarterback. That's the one where we kind of like overlook, like, yeah, y'all can have that. This class, the Diabella, Texas is another one.
Diabella was the other one I was thinking of, yeah.
Yeah, look, 4 blue chip quarterbacks in the state of Florida have already committed in 26. That alone is nuts. But there are more. There are at least 2 more blue chips today in the class of 2026 in the state of Florida that are uncommitted. Both of them have worked out and earned scholarship offers at Miami this year. Michael Clayton is one, and Darion Coleman is the other, both from Orlando, just like Hart and Grubbs and all these guys. And both have been to campus lately. I think Clayton got his offer maybe in March after going to a spring practice at the U, and then he went to the next day came to Rivals Camp Miami and won quarterback MVP over a lot of the guys that we've been talking about. Big pocket passer, 6'3", 6'4", smooth delivery, just a clean mechanical guy who looks like the prototypical quarterback. And then Darion Coleman last summer wins the 7-on-7 at the U, comes back this summer, wins it again without Vernell Brown. And it's like he almost forced Shannon Dawson's hand. Like, look, man, I keep coming down here and winning tournaments. You probably should offer me a scholarship. So he's been a fan of Miami his whole life. So for him to get that scholarship offer, I think means a ton. And now there's word we confirmed yesterday, Marcus, that he's going back down this weekend to Miami. So he'll be able to, for the first time, visit as a top priority. So typically when that's the case and the stars sort of align that way, things can move pretty fast. We just talked about, I mean, the span of Noah Grubbs committing to Notre Dame to Brady Hart committing to Michigan was like a week. I mean, everything, all four of those guys flew off the board. So there's an urgency from schools that don't have a quarterback. Hey, let's correct this thing. So they've seen Clayton throw, they've seen Coleman throw. Both are in state, both are priorities, both have the offer. So I don't know if Miami's like, hey, we're just going to pick between these two, or if it's a first come, first serve type of deal. But they're so different. Coleman is a legitimate dual threat. I think he jumped 35 inches on the vert, but he's got a heck of an arm. He's got maybe a better arm than most of these other guys we've talked about, including Diabell, including Noah Grubbs, guys that are much taller and bigger than Coleman, who's about 6 foot tall. But the ball just jumps off of this kid's arm, which is why his recruitment has taken a little bit longer to get to this point. But Oklahoma's in the mix. UCF is going crazy to try to keep him in Orlando. So you get the sense that the pressure coming from Mario Cristobal, Gus Malzahn, Brent Venables, all these big-time coaches could lead to a decision pretty soon. So if I'm a Miami fan, I'm keeping an eye on Darion Coleman's visit this weekend. And then if Miami doesn't have its QB beyond that, I think Michael Clayton is another one to absolutely focus on. Those are the guys, again, both from Orlando, both 4 stars on Rivals.com in the Rivals 250, and each of them have become national recruits this spring. So the timing is still there because we do have this historic class of 2026 at the QB position. So certainly going to benefit all the schools in Florida, you would think, and certainly Miami is expected to be one of them.
Yeah, 2026 shaping to be the year of the QB here in the Sunshine State. One little nugget for me about Darion Coleman, though, is that he's an alpha dog, man. He is an alpha dog. he's that guy who's very similar to like their current quarterback in Cam Ward, where he commands the room. He commands the offense when you see him out there 7-on-7. I had a chance to watch him during a pylon tournament at St. Thomas Aquinas earlier in the year, and I just loved what I saw from him. Got to speak to him afterwards as well, and actually very humble kid. Once you speak to him, but when he's out there on the field, he's directing guys. He's got that Florida swag to him. He's got that Miami feel to him. So when I first watched him, I wasn't sure if he was big enough, for Miami to get, because, size matters when it comes to the QB position. You could be a great quarterback. As we've seen over the years, John, we've seen plenty of great quarterbacks, from, Tiger to Keon Jenkins, Scooter from a few years ago. They're just great quarterbacks, but just too small to really play at a high level. But this guy, Darion Coleman, he's right there hovering around 6 feet. So he's 2026. So he'll probably grow another inch or two. So he'll probably end up about 6'2" by the time he, enters college football. So I think Miami's in a really good place for him. And I think he just attitude wise, personality wise, I think he fits what Miami is looking for. So lastly, just kind of want to talk about another big player in the 2025 class, which is Byron Louis. Byron Louis is the running back, highly coveted. He had like an unofficial top 3 of Miami, Florida State, and Wisconsin. But then those Bulldogs all of a sudden join in the mix here, bro. Like you just can't,
Yeah.
you can't deny like what UGA is doing there, just in recruiting, overall, and now with one of Miami's sought after players in Byron Louis. It was pop-up visit, I guess you could say, that ended up being an official. It seems he's really liking what he saw over there in Athens. How do you think this one plays out? Do you think Miami still is the leader here?
I do think Miami's in good shape. because Georgia's push is so new. Byron basically last week got a call out of the blue, and they said, hey, we'd love to see you work out. So he goes up on a Wednesday, goes to the Georgia camp, crushes it, and Georgia says, you know what, you're going to be on our board. Why don't you come for an official? So he 2 days later went back for an official visit and really liked that first true impression of UGA. Now, look, Byron's kind of like we talked about with Amari Wallace. Byron's been a name for 2-3 years at this point. So he's been all over the place. And at different times, different schools have trended for him. And the first time I talked to him in person, he was doing the SEC thing. I want to be at Bama. I want to be at Georgia. These are the schools that I really want to spend time with. This was as an underclassman. But then as he got older, it seemed like it was going to be a Sunshine State type of battle. Florida State has certainly made an impression in the last few months. And then Miami's always been there. Miami has always been there for him, even going through different running backs coaches, which is not always a good thing. They've still been able to maintain that high level, number one school, number two at worst type of deal with Byron Louis. So I say all that to say Miami has survived a lot of runs from other programs up Byron's list. I think Ohio State was trending at one point. So he's always been open to having another contender, but Miami's always been that common denominator. It's always been that school that he brings it back home to, quite literally. So I do think the Canes are in a good spot for him. He's been on campus a billion times, a ton of teammates at the U. I mean, he looks at Mark Fletcher as like a legitimate big brother. They split carries, those last couple of years at American Heritage. So yeah. I do think Miami's going to have a legitimate say for Byron Louis before all is said and done. My future cast has been on the Canes for several months. I haven't moved it. I thought about it, but I haven't moved it yet. Florida State, I think, was a legitimate threat, even more so than Georgia, popping up over the last few weeks or so. So I still think he stays in the state between the Canes and the Seminoles before all is said and done. But here's the thing. I talked to him after the Georgia OV. There's no timeline. There's a lot of these kids want to get this thing done, right? Chris Ewald wants to commit in the next week. We know a lot of these in Miami's gotten 3 in 3 days, right? We just talked about these quarterbacks that are trying to come off the board. Byron is like on the other side of that. He's kind of like, when it comes, it comes. So we'll see. Yeah. So if he rushes into something that could be something for Georgia to maybe latch on to, but if he continues to take his time and there's no sort of urgency in that decision-making process, I think that's great news for Miami because, like we've said, they've hung around and been that control in this experiment for years at this point. So I think Miami's always going to have a hat on the table. And if he wants to wait and maybe see how the season plays out a little bit before making a decision, that's great news for the Canes. But even if he rushed into it, that hat will be on the table, and it will be tough for Byron to select another, in my opinion.
Yeah, you made a great point with the cycling of the running back coaches because, he went, from I think he's maybe on his third. Miami's on his third running back coach since, his recruitment started with UM, and Miami still has been that steady Eddie program for him. So I think that really says a lot about, how he feels about Miami. So I think Miami's always going to be in a good spot, even if he commits to somewhere else. But, we'll see how it flakes out. Miami has done well with bringing in running backs from Broward County, as far as Mark Fletcher, Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, Jordan Lyle in this upcoming, cycle, I guess you could say. He is on campus already training. And then now to get Byron Louis, I mean, that would be, really good for the Hurricanes to continue to get arguably the best running back in Broward County year after year after year. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast, this edition. Once again, John Garcia from Rivals.com, kind enough to join me today. Next week, we'll be at the Rivals 5-star. So stay tuned to Rivals.com and CanesCounty.com for more information on the plenty of top recruits that will be in attendance in Jacksonville. Also, make sure you subscribe to the website for free until fall camp. It's an outstanding deal until fall camp. This offer is valid until the end of the weekend. And then also make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.